Hello, welcome to Kevin Can Always Pick Last, chapter 12 now, the final chapter. Okay. Ma, can I use the car tonight? I poured my bowl of cereal for breakfast. Added milk until the flakes were dangerously close to spilling over onto the table. Mum looked up from the morning paper spread out over the kitchen table, her eyes slightly unfocused until she adjusted her glasses to look at me. Why do you need the car? She pushed the sugar container over to me. I sighed. Every single time, it had to be a battle. It's my birthday, Ma. Lionel and I are going to the beach. But Kevin, I thought we'd have pizza and then have Uncle Henry and Aunt Dee over for birthday cake. Her eyes showed her hurt. I knew she wouldn't put up too much of a fight, but even this was more than I wanted to deal with today. I'm 16, Ma. I'm too old to be taken out for pizza and blowing out candles and some crummy birthday cake. I didn't want to hurt her. Since Dad's death, it was as if Mum had become just a shadow of the person she used to be. And it seemed that just about everything I did managed to hurt her somehow. I pushed the container of sugar back to the center of the table. No more sugary milk for me. I was now a man. No birthday cake? If I hadn't seen it about 100 times now, I wouldn't have thought she was going to cry. I wasn't a kid anymore. I relented just a little. How about brownies instead? Would that be okay? Immediately, the lines of worry between her eyebrows eased and she smiled at me. That would be nice. But let's plan it for tomorrow, okay? I wanted to spend my birthday at the beach with my friends tonight. Sure, Kevin, if that's what you want. So I can have the car? Mum nodded and turned back to her newspaper and a cup of coffee. I love it when a plan comes together. I wolfed down my cereal, dropped the bowl into the sink, and headed down to the basement for my morning workout. Birthday or not, I had a workout schedule that I stuck to 7 days a week. I was more disciplined about this, attention to my bodybuilding and karate training than anything else in my life, except maybe girls. Even though I had big plans for later in the day, the minute I set foot in my workout space, time stopped. There was no rushing what I had in my schedule. Upper body, lower body, kata. While I hadn't, while I didn't want my mother to fawn over me with a birthday cake and pizza, I did have a plan for blowing out candles. Still one of my favorite moves, extinguishing candles with the speed of a punch from either hand. I had already determined that I would privately blow out 16 candles at the end of my practice. I could easily extinguish 2 candles at once. I was getting really good at 3. Today I wanted to try 4 at a time. I lit 4 tapers and lined them up in a row, staring at the yellow flames, the 4 individual flames blended into one as I tilted my head from side to side, evaluating the best path to use. With speed that impressed my karate instructor, Paul, I made my first punch. All 4 flames disappeared, leaving 4 smoking wicks. As the 4 lines of white smoke drifted upward, I made a wish. Wish Dad. Wish Dad could see me now. Gone was the lost and lonely boy I had been when Dad died. I still missed him, but I had finally figured out that I was probably going to carry that empty, painful hole in my heart for the rest of my life. There was no getting around it. I was always going to miss him. Only when I was alone did I allow myself to miss my dad now. Down here, in the darkness of the basement, I could be sad, even cry if I wanted to. But I didn't want to cry today. I straightened, picked up the lighter, and lit the 4 tapers again. Pow! 4 lines of white smoke rose toward the ceiling. Another wish. I wish my life had a point. Aside from weight training and karate, I just wasn't sure what I was going to do with myself. I was getting through high school okay. I was scraping by. What was I going to do with my life after that? Another 4 flames beckoned. Another carefully considered and executed punch. Another 4 lines of smoke moving upward. This time, I felt a sense of satisfaction and confidence. Maybe my life already had a purpose. I was finally doing something I was really, really good at. 4 years ago, I never thought I'd be punching out flames with the speed of my punches. I wish Mum would come out of her funk. That wish surprised me. I'd been noticing more and more how lost she seemed right after Dad died. She really crumpled emotionally, but she had to pull things together. She was a single mom with two kids to raise, and she'd done the best she could. I'm not sure if she would ever really fully understand me. She and my sister were a lot closer than Mum and I, but I did care about her. And as I made that wish, I knew what I really did want her to find a way to live and enjoy life again. I guess both of us had to just get past her grief and move on. Not that the neighbourhood bullying had helped matters any. The past year had been worse on my mum than on me. Countless times I'd come home to find the yard and fence covered with toilet paper, or the car egged or paint with shoe polish and garnish, cleaning things up before I got home, and it taking me a while to figure out it was her one way or one way of protecting me. She couldn't stop the bullying, but she did what she could to keep them from hurting me by hiding the evidence before I could see it. The final four candles, one blew out. I wish I never had to see my tormentors ever again. Right, like that's ever going to happen. Kevin! Mum's voice sounded at the top of the stairs. I smell smoke! I laughed as I made sure the candles were completely out. Just me, Ma, blowing out my birthday candles. That summer, I was going out with several girls at the same time, and my social schedule had gotten pretty complicated. Who would have guessed I would have such a problem? When Lionel suggested we go to Revere Beach for the evening, we decided it would simplify things if it would just be the two of us. We go to the beach and see who was there. Beaches are built for red blooded American boys because they are heavily populated with gorgeous bikini clad girls, pretending they're only there to work on their tan. Yet through their eyelashes, they watch us guys wander up and down the boardwalk. It was a great game of pretense, each side ignoring the other. Yet everyone knew it was part of the game. As I'd learned when I first met Lionel, he seemed to attract the most lively, the most beautiful girls around. And before we'd been at the beach very long, we found ourselves escorting a group of bathing beauties who modestly covered their bathing suits with a strong, light cloth that exposed one beautifully tanned thigh all the way up, hiding just enough of everything else. I breathed in a huge breath of moist, salty air and thought, I like having a birthday. Yes, celebrating my birthday wasn't the burden it had been for the past 4 years. That evening, with the lights of the Ferris wheel glowing behind me, I looked out over the water and realized that I'd come a long way in the past few years. I'd gone from being a lost little boy who didn't know how to face the world without his dad to a karate black belt surrounded by people who enjoyed being with him and didn't have any intention of hurting him. If anyone with him, eh, if anyone had told me I'd be this happy by the time I was 16, I would have called them a liar. Even in my most fantastic dreams, it never occurred to me that I could ever be happy again. Just as my content thoughts filtered through my consciousness, I felt a savage kick at the base of my boardwalk. I heard the gasp of girls and familiar, ugly, mocking laughter. Laughter that haunted my thoughts, my dreams, both day and night. The crumbs I had dubbed the tiresome trio, Dawn, Tony, and Dave, stood there guffawing, as if they'd never seen anything so funny. I didn't have to look over my shoulder to see it. I'd seen it often enough over the years to know what they looked like. The rage that boiled up inside of me was raw and vicious. For all my good intentions, the fight I'd been preparing for, but I'd secretly hope would never be, was upon me. It had always been bad enough when they bullied and humiliated me in school in front of the kids who witnessed the same scene day in, day out. But tonight, of all nights, on my birthday, no, I refused to tolerate this. My life had moved on, past these bozos. Now, here they were, pulling me back into my old life. The one where I was a victim, a punching bag, the object of ridicule, shame, and torment. I was no longer their willing punching bag in my mind. I had moved on to something better than their sick and twisted inner circle. Their laughter and taunts grew louder, attracting a crowd, just as they had intended. Public humiliation was their forte, and they had certainly mastered it. There was nothing much more, more public than the boardwalk on a summer evening, with families shouted with glee from the top of the Ferris wheel, where couples wandered hand in hand seeking romance in the dusky moonlight. Idiots. Their idea of fun was perverted. I had moved on to a different life, but just as with the most insecure people, they didn't like me changing their world. They couldn't stand the idea that I might decide that I was no longer wanted to be their willing punching bag, that I would stop wanting to be readmitted into their sick and twisted inner circle. They didn't like me, but no one else could have either, it seemed. As in the scene in The Last Samurai, time seemed to stand still. I could hear each grain of sand fall to the cool and damp surface of the beach. The sounds of laughter and music faded into the background. I breathed in and out, feeling the breath reach deep inside of me. All the way down, my heartbeat, first incredibly fast, slowed. Throb, throb, um. I heard it in my ears. With very deliberate movements, I pushed myself up, and with my back to the laughing trio, I considered how I would take on this situation. Lionel came up by my side and said, "Bro, you need some help? I can get you covered." And he would too. But this was my fight. Still looking out over the ocean, my back to my enemy, I shook my head. "No thanks, I've got this." He looked at me for a long moment, then he gave me a single nod and backed away. I never asked him what he saw in my eyes at that moment, but I knew it was dangerous. He quietly got the girls back, and a little circle seemed to form around us. As I dusted off the damp sand from my pants and shirt, I planned my approach. I had the angel in the form of Paul Taylor on one shoulder. "Remember, Kevin, only use force in self defense." I knew this. I had trained myself to become a killing machine. For the past 3 years, I'd been practicing how I would destroy Dave. Every single kick in my basement had his name on it. Each time I punched my punch bag, it had been Tony's nose, and every other blow that knocked out the flame of my candles had been to Don's gut. On my other shoulder was the devil, that deep seated molten hatred that wanted revenge. I could taste it, the salty, bitter dish I'd been looking for. Again, Paul Taylor's voice echoed in my head. "Remember, Kevin, don't use your skills in malice." Was it malice to protect myself? Was it malice to pretend to defend myself? Was it malice to wipe the sneering smiles off their faces for all the pain they had put me and my mother through over the years? Yeah, it probably was, but I didn't care. This was my fight, and I knew how to win, even with the odds of 3-1. In that moment, I was a psychopath. I didn't care what happened to me. I just knew that I wanted to hurt these guys, snap their necks. The first move was to break Don's knee. It opened, bringing him down forward, and with the rising bridge hand, I strike to the throat. People get their jaws broken with what that move to the Adam's apple. You can forget it. He's never swallowing again. A heel stomp to the back of the leg, judo chop to the back of the head, knife hand right to the back of the neck would snap a spine. 8 seconds tops. Tony I punched straight in the handsome Italian face, the one his mother loved so much she never saw what a piece of shit her son had become. stumped the knee from the side, and he basically wouldn't walk the rest for the rest of his life. Do I? Don't I? It kept going back and forth. There was no pain or agony in my decision. It was just a matter of choosing. Do I choose to go against my moral code and destroy this sob, or do I walk away? Effing wimp. Dave just couldn't help himself. You're nothing but a pansy. Years of being abused at the hands of his mother, father, and older brother had turned Dave into such an ugly human being that if he'd been a dog, he would have been put down. My response was a blank, cold stare. From the moment I got up from the sand, I hadn't moved. Everything had played in my head like a movie, but my body, my face revealed nothing. I brought my hands to my side and slowly assumed a boxing stance, left leg forward, right leg back, ready to go. Combat ready. Weight on my back leg, my strong leg, my hands weren't raised. I was inviting an attack. Hands raised above the waist was considered assault. I knew the law. It was like waving a stick in front of a lion. That's the best you can do. Kick me from behind. Now who's the effing wimp? I challenged. I didn't blink, didn't swallow. My breathing was so controlled and relaxed that it didn't even feel as though I was breathing. I had rehearsed this scene so many times in my head. I knew exactly what I was going to do, and I wasn't worried about myself. I knew I was going to come out of this just fine. If they chose to engage, at least one person was going to be dead, and it wasn't going to be me. All their bullshit, all the time I had spent training, all the hours I had for skulked down alleyways to avoid these jokers. Everything that had happened between us over the years all boiled down to these 30 seconds. It felt like a year, but it was over in half a minute. My intensity was like touching the surface of the sun. I could feel it burning inside of me, aware of the desire of the years, and yet I was completely at peace. These three bullies didn't deserve to walk the planet. They weren't human beings. They were bugs, and I wanted them to give me a reason to squash them. I hated these three people more than I ever hated anything in my entire life. Without the training I'd learned, the self control I'd been trained with, the core beliefs of character, self control, etiquette, and honor, I would have killed three boys this night. Self control came to my rescue. I'd been taught that I could use lethal force only in self defense. Being kicked from behind was not a threat to my mortal being, even though it ignited justifiable emotions erupting from the past years. I come right to the very brink of hell, and my training had taught me exactly how to take out these three. But the difference between me and the people who bullied me all my life is that I knew the difference. Somewhere down inside of me, there was a glimmer of compassion. It's true that if I'd taken these three guys out, most people wouldn't blame me. It was well known throughout the Everett school system that I'd been systematically bullied for many years, but I knew that just because I was angry, I had no right to take their lives. The true distinction between being bullied and becoming a bully myself was knowing the difference between self defense or aggression. There were two warriors inside of me battling for control. One side was the angry warrior, the one who wanted to F and kill them for all the crap they had put my family through. My father dying, my mother being tormented when she had worries and burdens beyond bearing. The other warrior, the trained one, realized that these idiots, while culpable, weren't really at fault. Deep down, I knew they were assholes, idiots, morons, losers. They were living a life they hated, and the only way they felt better was when they made someone else around them feel worse. For years, I'd been that scapegoat. No more. I didn't know how far I would have taken this moment at the beach if they'd chosen to pursue it. But Tony, the one I'd known the longest, watched me closely after I said, "Make a move." He was looking for a sign of weakness, a lack of resolve, because then he could strike, and if he could, He definitely would, but he didn't see that opening. He saw the level of anger I was controlling. He knew that I wanted to and was willing to kill him and his two henchmen tonight. I spent the better part of 3 years training and getting stronger to have the fight of my life disappear as if nothing ever happened. In the blink of an eye, it was over. Lionel watched everything unfold. The girls just knew there was a couple uncertain moments with a few ruffians who ultimately decided not to mess with us. In the blink of an eye, Tony and the company turned tail and retreated, relaxing their hands and feet, left their boxing stance. Not a single punch had been thrown. I put my arm over the shoulders of the pretty blonde next to me and around the waist of the freckled redhead who was as Irish as I was. The rest of the evening, we laughed, talked, and acted like the teenagers we were. As I drove Lionel home in Mum's ugly peach coloured Maverick, a 1977, with no power steering and 55 AC, the only air conditioning with windows down, going 55 miles per hour, I was relieving my earlier happiness. Our evening at the beach could have turned very, very ugly. I discovered that most bullies are cowards. When they know they're beating, they will retreat. Lionel had been pretty quiet most of the way home. He finally broke the silence. What happened back there? What did happen back there? I think I discovered that anger isn't my better than my sadness. That sadness for my father's death that I'd chosen to channel into anger had done nothing to serve me well in terms of my mental health. I could very easily have lost control there on the beach, and instead of Lionel and me heading home as carefree as we'd begun the evening, I could have ended up in jail on murder charges. Because it would have been murder. They hadn't attacked me to the point where I feared for my life. They were looking to insult and humiliate me as they had done for years. What I had learned is that by mastering karate to the point of becoming a black belt, I had something to fall back on. But it's not that much different learning to shoot a gun. Do you fire the gun just because you have it and you can, or do you fire the gun because you fear for your life? My black belt has taught me to defend myself to the point of taking my opponent out, meaning I could have killed up to 3 people. The difference is, I chose not to. The summer I turned 16 stands out as one of the happiest of my life. School was out. I just earned my black belt in karate, achieving what had seemed like an impossible goal when I first started out in my martial arts journey. The realization that Lionel had helped me reach that I was probably never going to change the way my former childhood friends had chosen to behave my freed me. The more I thought about them, the more I realized I didn't want to stick with a bunch of bullies and losers. They were trapped in a way of life, a way of thinking that meant nothing to me. Earning my black belt taught me that anything I wanted to accomplish was within my grasp, as long as I put the necessary time and effort into it. My mother probably wished that I had applied myself to my schoolwork as diligently as I had my martial arts studies and my weightlifting, but I had different priorities. Learning that my mum didn't have all the answers was another interesting revelation. When I was younger and would turn to her in tears, all she could do was console me and try to divert my attention from the immediate situation. And then she would give me the tired old phrase, "Tomorrow's another day. Maybe you'll find your friends again." She was almost always wrong when she said that, but when I was younger, I had nothing else to cling to, so I earnestly wanted to be true. I prayed with all the fervor and intensity that a 13-year-old boy could uncover. Despite all my efforts in the intervening years, it had done me no good. The shattered mirror I'd faced that day of my father's funeral seemed to have been put back together. All the cracks are still there. There's no way of fixing the pain and hurt of our past, But the mirror, whole again, reflects who we become as a result of how we handle our pains and our newly discovered strengths. Hey, Dad. My voice flew on the early morning breeze. You'd have been proud of me last night. I stood beside Dad's grave, having placed a bouquet of flowers on it. I finally got it, Dad. You said to punch them in the nose, and I pretty much kicked their asses without landing a single punch. I sat down in the soft, cool grass, picking at a single blade, elbows on my knees. You knew, didn't you, that I had to make it my own way. It wouldn't have worked if you'd fought my own battles for me. Dad's easy ability to make friends wherever he went was the one thing I really envied. I figured something out too. The world's bigger than I thought it was, and there are people out there I actually like hanging out with. I have friends now. The early morning grey light moved away from the approaching rosy fingers of the sun. I got up to leave, then turned back around. There was one more thing I needed to tell Dad. I want you to know that you don't have to worry about me anymore. I can take care of myself now. It's funny, but I'm the guy I can count on now. It was true. I was my own hero. Dad knew I had to have the internal strength to stand up to my bullies, whether I did it physically or not. At last night's showdown, I'd broken through a lot of barriers I'd been putting up over the years. My martial arts training had given me the physical skills that I needed for confrontation. But it was the belief I had in myself that was my real power. That belief will be with me for the rest of my life. And that concludes the final chapter of Kevin Kearns' Always Pick Last.